Serious, police officers of Reddit, have you ever had to arrest a relative so friend? If so, what was it like afterwards? I spent around 2 years as a special constable for the Met Police. The unit I joined would mostly work nighttime violence, for example, when pubs and clubs close, at any borough that requested our assistance, and so we could be in any borough that night. One night shift we are in my home borough. I'm in the van and we're circling round near where I live, which was a bit of a novelty. Normally being anywhere in London means I have no clue where I am. A call comes down to reports of a burglary and I freeze as it's my neighbor's address. We arrive and speak to the family, a young Muslim couple who have just gotten married a few days ago, and they looked more surprised to see me than I them. They heard noises and came downstairs to find someone in a mask rooting through drawers, who scarpered out the back door when spotted. At around this time the door knocked, and it's my girlfriend again, surprised to see me, who says there's someone in our garden. Here we go. This could be a good job. My garden at the time was pretty secure. Unless you can scale walls, you aren't getting out. My colleague goes in through the front door whilst I jump over the wall from the neighbors and immediately get jumped by someone. They were pretty weak and I easily overpower them as my colleague arrives baton drawn. After arresting and cuffing, we get the lights on and I find it's someone I've been friends with since school, who we had just had round with his wife for dinner a few nights ago. Turns out he knew that our neighbors had gotten married and had planned to burgle them for their jewelry and wedding gifts. Suffice to say, I am no longer in contact. He got sent down for 2 years and only got released a few months ago. Michigan cop here. I got a call on the 5th of July from alcohol treatment services stating that 2 guys who were out on bond blew hot due to partying from the night before. When I got there, one of the guys was a good friend of mine. The hard part was his dad, who always took great care of me, was standing right there while I hooked him up. They were super cool about it, but I still feel bad. On the way to the jail we caught up and talked about family. As a recovering addict who works in the recovery field, I'd just like to let you know that that type of experience could have a great, positive impact on your friend. Getting arrested by a stranger is one thing, and can easily be shrugged off, but getting arrested by a friend in front of your father can cause some serious self-reflection. Police officer here. Got called to a verbal domestic and quickly learned after speaking with the female that an old friend's dad was cheating on his wife with her. I had my partner take over the investigation as I didn't want to be biased. Anyway, guy shows up, we have an awkward chat, and everyone is cautioned not to contact or communicate with each other anymore, and both parties are in full agreement. Female doesn't want to ruin his life and he says he is done with his cheating ways. 2 hours later the female calls and tells us that he drove by her house a few times after we left. I call him and give him a second and very stern caution to give her some breathing room or he will be charged with domestic criminal harassment. I try to make him see reason and it seems to work. No more calls for the rest of our shift. The next morning I am brushing my teeth before heading into work and I get a phone call from him saying that he screwed up and left a note on her car last night. She called a different cop who issued a warrant for his arrest after reading our reports that he had already been cautioned twice. He asked what to do. I told him to report to the front desk as soon as I got to work and he complied. Then my partner from the previous day and I arrested and booked him for criminal harassment. Some people just don't get the hint. I arrested my sister 2 years ago. We are fine now. Story. 2 years ago I stopped by my parents' house while on duty to have a cup of coffee with my father. When I got there I heard screaming from the backyard and went out to see what was going on. I saw that my sister had my mother pinned to the ground and was kicking her violently, multiple times, while screaming and swearing at the top of her lungs. I tackled her to stop the attack and she began to punch and kick me too. The neighbors had come outside to see what was going on and my sister would not calm down. My mother was badly injured and it took my father and me both to get my sister under control. She was fighting like I've never seen someone fight before. She was biting, clawing, kicking, and tried to gouge out my eyes. I had no choice but to disengage and use pepper spray in an attempt to subdue her. It worked and we finally got her under control. I called for an ambulance to evaluate my mother and my sister was transported to the station by another officer. The story I found out later was that my mother had found methamphetamine in my sister's car, and when she confronted my sister about it, my sister lost it and attacked her. My sister was committed to a drug rehab facility and has been clean, as far as I know, ever since. We have a good relationship now, although we'll never be best friends or anything. Former federal agent. I had to arrest a former partner who I graduated the academy with. He was a good guy, was involved in a shooting and never recovered. Turned to alcohol. Marriage went south. Everything went downhill. After an incident where he started shooting out the windows on his house, the local cops cordoned off the area and notified our agency. We talked him down and convinced him to come with us. Arrested him and we drove him to the local PD where they processed him. He was terminated and a senior agent was reprimanded for covering up a previous alcohol and firearms related incident. Ex-NSW police officer here. I was in the car with another constable. Check bona fides came over. Just means find out what's going on. Often due to horrible smells. Arrive at address in industrial area. Clearly drugs being cooked because no one is burning that crap at 3 AM unless it's illegal. It smelled horrible. Male comes outside to immediately give himself up. I secured him whilst my partner went in. Turns out the second one was my partner's longtime family friend. We both had to go on forced leave after while another LAC investigated to make sure there was no criminal activity on our behalf. They take that shot pretty seriously in Australia. Turn out the raw materials would have equated to around 10 mil street value. As a military police officer in Hawaii, I became really good friends with a guy in my unit. Babysat his 4-year-old, was invited over for family dinners, and everything. Go into shift with him one day when I am told to relieve him of his weapon and cuff him. Ended up having to wake his wife up, who thought I just stopped by for breakfast lol. To investigate a domestic violence report that his mother-in-law called in from NC. Ended up that she wanted to go home. He didn't want his kid to leave. They got in an argument, and she called home to tell her mom about the argument they had. The military makes the service members leave their homes in these situations. But of course the barracks were full, so less than 12 hours after I handcuffed him, guess who's sleeping on the floor of my room? I think he stayed for a few weeks before we got on each other's nerves lol. He wasn't mad at me about it. I was doing as I was ordered. But it was extremely difficult, though I think I stayed professional throughout, interviewing his wife, my friend, to get evidence to convict him of a crime. It was also awkward with my buddy, because I obviously couldn't discuss the case with him. He understood and didn't ask me much about it. I think the worst was, during and after the investigation, that I felt some guilt for not knowing what was going on and trying to help in some way. I also felt like I was tearing apart a 4-year-old's family, though it was obviously on the way out already. Typing this one for my dad. Back in 2006, it was nearing the end of second shift and I was ready to get off. The call came in of a shooting. I was about a mile away tops, so I was first on the scene by a lot. I head inside, check the bedrooms and find 2 men dead from shotgun wounds. I knew them. Family friends from growing up. Good people, but crap heads. You know what I mean? Always getting into trouble. Never big things. Just drugs here. Public intoxication there. Nothing huge. Well, they ate it that day. What got me, though, was I had seen their older sister earlier when I pulled over her friend. It's just weird how you can see someone and talk about the family quick and a few hours later know that she's about to find out how much she's just lost. They were still warm. So, I continued my search. Fast. As I called in the ambulance, I check, find the back door ajar and head out. I get a call saying that the shooter was still in the neighborhood as someone just reported him. Not a block away within the last 2-3 minutes. Going through the backyards and across alleys. Other officers are now in the area and we're hunting him. I see movement. It's him. It's the guy. The shooter. No weapon to be seen. Thankfully, I got him in my sights. Yelled to him to stop where he is. Thank fricking God he does. Pistol still drawn on him. I get him on the ground. Cuff him, and think for a moment. Shoot him, he freaking deserves it. Another officer is now on the scene with me, gets me off the shooter's back and pushes me aside. I sit down next to his cruiser and cry. After, I end up smoking about a pack of cigarettes before I get home. I had quit in 1994 and this was the first and only time I broke down and smoked. I put in my retirement papers 2 weeks later. That sounds rough as heck, but kudos to him for upholding what's right and wrong even in a situation as messed up as that. I'm sure a lesser man would have tried something to exact revenge in that scenario. Last week I arrested a guy I went to high school with for misdemeanor destruction of property that myself and several other officers witnessed. I didn't know it was him until after we got to the station and I began getting his information. His driver's license had his old address on it and the city was where I went to high school. I immediately recognized him. He was 2 grades above me but had a sister who was my age. He was very intoxicated and upset about the whole situation, so in order to bridge the gap and get him to calm down I told him we went to the same high school and that I knew his sister. I thought he might get upset but it was a risk I needed to take. I started asking him how he'd been and we talked about the various mutual friends we had. He started to calm down, which was nice, and earlier he had been very tense, upset, and erratic. When we realized how many mutual friends we had, he asked me not to tell anyone out of embarrassment, though what he did was a matter of public record. I promised that I wouldn't, since part of good policing is the ability to have good discretion. I explained to him the arrest process as best I could and told him that he would be out in about 3 hours. Once I was able to turn him over to the cell block technicians, I immediately looked him up on Facebook and blocked him. Prior to blocking him, I noticed his profile picture was that of him and his new bride. I offered him a phone call to get in touch with her, but he declined. As promised, I completed the paperwork as fast as I could and he was released on his own recognizance to return to court in a few weeks. When I spoke with the prosecutor's office, I had to disclose this relationship. The attorney said he was worried that the defense might try to make the case that I arrested him because I might have had a grudge against him. I disagreed. I argued that it showed good judgment on my part and that I was able to do exactly as I had sworn to do, which was uphold the law equally. The case won't be resolved for a few more months, but I suspect he'll pay for the damages in exchange for having the charges dropped. Interesting thing though that I remembered from high school. Though we attended the same high school, he didn't graduate from our high school. A semester before he was due to graduate, he was arrested in a prank gone bad for destruction of property and was kicked out. He had to graduate from a nearby high school. I'd also like to say that I have run into other people in the past that I've known through the course of my job. In times where I feel I'd be too biased one way or another, I've requested that other police officers handle the scene call, and it's worked out quite well. Might want to take this down if it's an open investigation. Defense could use this as some bullshit evidence you have a grudge against him and bragged about it online. I gave a very senior police officer's son a pee-wee ticket once, or more properly a penalty notice for disorder for public urination. He paid it very quickly and nothing more was said about it. For what it's worth, he did tell me who his dad was and I recognized the surname, but he only told me after he was given the ticket and it was issued and dealt with in the normal way. I think there might have been a few red faces. I've never come across a situation where I needed to arrest a close friend or someone close to me though. I guess it helps that I don't live anywhere near where I work. I had to arrest an old school friend once for burglary. Never saw him again afterwards though. We'd lost contact after school, so the thought of meeting up with him afterwards. Yes, friend, he was drunk and driving. Wasn't a friend afterward, but he was alive and didn't kill anyone that night. So, fair trade. You did the right thing and no one needs someone who blames you for their own mistakes as a friend. When I was a freshman in high school, we had an unusually aggressive group of seniors who would pick on us often. Note, no, I did not become a cop because I got picked on when I was 15. I didn't even decide I wanted to trial until I was 25. Just saying. So out of the entire year there was one person who ever stuck up for me, and I have always been thankful that one of their peers who was their size was willing to stand up to them. Anyway, flash forward to my first week as a reserve police officer. Volunteer police to learn the job and gain experience prior to applying full time. Uniform, gun, badge etc. Just no paycheck. We'd go to a call of someone drunk falling through the window of a business. Show up for my first arrest and guess who? The guy. The one person who ever stuck up for me, and I had no ability to help him because I was brand new and had no clout at the time. Worst part was when he was in cuffs and looked at me repeating, "Really? Really?" I haven't forgot that moment, and it actually played a large part on how I treated people when I was an officer actually. 8 years and resigned now. I have since touched base with him and thanked him for what he did for me in high school. He hasn't fallen through any windows since and he's doing well. Haha. Pulled my mom over on the side of a busy highway. She totally did not know it was me and I let her go with a hug. Saw plenty of people I knew in jail, neighbors, people I went to school with. For what it's worth, no officer should ever have to do this, such as it constitutes a conflict of interest and can result in very large issues. I, personally, was told to handle a domestic violence issue involving a female friend of mine and her significant other. I had contacting the sergeant and told him of my concern toward a possible conflict of interest. He advised me that if I was not sexually involved, wasn't trying to be sexually involved, and had never been sexually involved with the friend, I was to handle the incident myself. It ultimately led to my termination from the agency and blackballing within the law enforcement community. I work as a crime analyst for a police department, and it makes my parents and family friends insanely nervous. My dad and all his friends are involved with drugs back home, mostly pot, but some other stuff. Several of their friends died of overdoses before they turned 40. Getting into law enforcement has been quite a struggle for me. My family was not supportive at first because they were certain I would knock them out given the chance. The police departments and other agencies often wouldn't hire me after doing a background check on me and finding out I was affiliated with these people even though I never participated in anything. My family has since relaxed about it and they're proud of the work I do. But it still raises issues with my employment, and I always have to question whether I am doing the right thing by continuing to spend time with them, not reporting them, especially since I know some of the kids I grew up with are into H and crap like that now. But I have to say it's also been really entertaining. A couple years ago my parents threw a party and a bunch of the people attending hadn't seen me in 10+ years. We were sitting around on the porch after the party. Someone had a joint, etc. when one of the guys, who was recently incarcerated for running a large grow operation, asked me who I was. I said, "I'm X and Y's daughter," and then once he recognized me he asked me what I was doing lately and I told him, well, I'm in school getting a degree in criminal justice. The double take he did was hilarious. X and Y's kid, all grown up, hanging at this party with a bunch of people who have been in the drug trade for decades, studying to be law enforcement. Part of that sounds like the plot for The Departed. Back in 96 feet, before I left law enforcement and enlisted in the military, got a call to a bar fight, and when I arrived found a good friend of mine, Rick, was the primary involved. Now, Rick tried to go pro wrestler, WWE type, but never made the cut, but that gives you an idea of how he was built at 6 feet 4 inches. Additionally, my dad had just sold him a .45 revolver about 3 weeks earlier, and I knew Rick got stupid and mean when drunk. Long story short, and I asked him where his gun was. He said he didn't own a gun. I called him an idiot and a liar. My dad sold him one and I knew it. He laughed and recognized me, yes, that drunk, and told me it was at his house. I offered him a ride home and he walked out into my patrol car. He got a bunch of fines levied against him and I met him as he left court to give him a ride home. He called me in, but I joked that I did not say it would be a ride straight home. Still long distance FB friends 19 years later, though we have not seen each other since 97 feet and live on opposite sides of the country. I was a police officer for the local county police. I got a call out to a local tavern, pretty much the only one for 20 miles. The call was about 2 guys that had become drunk, belligerent, and disorderly, and once they were told they couldn't dance on the stage with the women before the bouncers. The bouncers had laid them out and they were recuperating their injuries and sobriety. The 2 guys were Corporal, Dancing Queen, now Captain Dancing Queen, and Lance Corporal, Boogie Nights, 2 Marines I've been stationed with the last 6 years and we have spent time in Iraq. The first thing they say when they see me, Happy and drunk as ever was my last name, just like they would at drill. I dang near bursted out laughing, but I took them into custody and put them in the back of the patrol car, them cursing and calling the bouncers pussies because it took 6 of them to get them off the stage. They were laughing at each other and having a great old time in the back of the patrol car. I talked to the bouncers and talked them out of pressing charges. Unfortunately, they were banned from coming back though. We had stories to tell our SSGT. The next morning at drill, might want to take their real names out of the post or change them up to Corporal, Whirlpool and Lance Corporal Armstrong just for anonymity's sake. Happened to a good friend of mine about 2 years after he started his job. At the moment it's pretty hard to get police work in Quebec. Typical Saturday night in Montreal, he gets called to a location by EMTs due to a difficult case where a guy locked out the bathroom in a club, presumably because he was sick. Turns out it's his brother-in-law who was banging a co-worker drunk out of his mind. Not pretty, especially having to write a statement that would be read in divorce court. My dad raised my half-brother as a son from the age of 18 months to around 17, when my half-brother was kicked out of the house for stealing my dead grandfather's Victorian coin collection and spending it at the local arcades. The two of them never spoke again. 20 years later, a teenager is brought into a police station. My dad, the jailing sergeant, looks down at him with a stern face. Arrested for fighting while drunk? Not very clever, is it? You're smart, lad. You don't need this charge coming up on every job you apply for. Sort yourself out and you'll have a good life. But keep doing this and you'll end up an unemployed drunk, just like your father. How do you know my father? Asked the boy. Because I told him the exact same thing 20 years ago. My dad said to the grandson he never had. Typing for my dad, and likely to get buried, but whatever. My parents, who were married at the time, were at a family function. I think it was Easter. Anyway, my dad, who was a prison guard, now retired sergeant, caught this scumbag uncle of mine, mom's side, videotaping my cousin who was 2 years old in a bathing suit. My dad asked what he was doing, and as he did that my uncle swung at him. My dad swiftly threw him to the ground and arrested him. Of course, my parents got divorced and my mom's whole family dislikes him mainly because of this incident, including other things. I was on the other side, albeit not arrested. When I was in high school, I was driving on my way to work. My father was the garrison commander at the time, sort of like the mayor of an army base, not the highest ranked officer, but in charge of the MPs and the like. I got pulled over for going like 10 over. I was freaking out, because I knew my dad would be upset. He let me off with a warning, partly because I was polite, and partly because I was clearly on my way to work. I had my uniform on. I wasn't sure he knew who I was until he told me he wouldn't give me ticket if I told my dad about it. I did as promised, but not until about 2 or 3 years later when he wasn't the garrison commander anymore, and I was in college and not really that groundable. My dad still had a moment over it, though. Had a cousin causing a disturbance while he was drunk. Went over there and told him to keep it down. There were 5 other people around. Everything was good at first until he wanted to get confrontational with me. I gave him a chance to go inside. He wouldn't comply, so I went to arrest him. He decided to run but quickly stopped and got in my face like he wanted to fight. I already removed my pepper spray due to the amount of others there. I quickly took a step back and sprayed him right across his eyes. He rushed towards me, which I grabbed his arm and pushed him into a wall before taking him to the ground. I cuffed him and put him in the car after rinsing his eyes. He eventually apologized on the ride to jail, charged him with public intoxication and held off on charging with resisting since he apologized. I arrested my childhood friend's father for driving while intoxicated. I pulled over a car and it turned out to be the father driving. He had always had a problem with alcohol. While I was talking to him and had already decided to charge him with the lesser charge of public intoxication, my friend and his brother pulled up in another car and insisted I charge him driving while intoxicated. Needless to say, it was really uncomfortable the next time I ran into the family. It turns out he was an abusive father, but that is another story. Just so you guys know, I used my discretion a lot depending on how egregious the infraction was. So I wasn't trying to give him a break because I knew him. I did it for the anyone I stopped who had been drinking and was behind the wheel. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.